I slammed the door behind me, my hands still trembling from what had just happened in that mahogany-paneled conference room. The rain outside matched my mood perfectly. Dark, unpredictable, and about to unleash something nobody saw coming. You see, I'd just walked out of my grandmother's will reading, and let me tell you, what I discovered there would make your head spin faster than a carnival ride. My name is Riley, and I thought I knew my family. Turns out, I didn't know anything at all. The lawyer, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, had just finished reading through the standard bequests. My cousins got the jewelry, the antique furniture, the family photos. I got something else entirely. Something that made my Aunt Victoria's face go white as freshly fallen snow, and my Uncle Theodore start sweating like he'd just run a marathon in August. You might want to stay for what happens next, because what my grandmother left me wasn't money or property. It was truth. And sometimes, truth is worth more than all the gold in Fort Knox. Let me back up a bit. My grandmother Eleanor was the kind of woman who could silence a room just by walking into it. She had this way of looking at you that made you feel like she could see straight through to your soul, cataloging every secret you'd ever kept. Growing up, I spent summers at her estate in Connecticut, a sprawling Victorian monster of a house that creaked and groaned like it was telling stories of its own. The house always felt heavy with secrets, rooms that were kept locked, conversations that stopped the moment I walked in. But Grandma Eleanor and I, we had a connection. She'd take me on long walks through her gardens, teaching me about the different flowers, their meanings, their secrets. "Plants don't lie, Riley," she'd say, her weathered hands gentle on a rose stem. "They show you exactly what they are. No pretense, no games." People could learn from that. I never understood what she meant then. Now I do. The day she died, I was 3 states away, finishing my master's degree in journalism. The call came from Victoria, my father's sister, her voice syrupy sweet in that way that immediately put me on guard. "Riley, darling, I'm afraid I have terrible news. Your grandmother passed peacefully in her sleep last night." Peacefully. That word stuck with me because nothing about Eleanor Bennett was peaceful. She was fire and lightning, storm clouds and sunshine. She was many things, but peaceful wasn't one of them. The funeral was a production worthy of Broadway. Half the town showed up, along with people I'd never seen before, wearing expensive suits and fake sorrowful expressions. Victoria played the grieving daughter-in-law to perfection, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief while making sure everyone noticed her new diamond bracelet. Theodore, her husband and my father's brother, stood beside her like a guard dog, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack walnuts. My own father had passed away 5 years earlier, cancer taking him too young, so it was just me representing our branch of the family tree. I felt alone in that crowd of mourners, like I was the only one who actually missed the woman we were supposed to be honoring. During a service, I kept thinking about the last conversation I'd had with Grandma Eleanor. It was 3 weeks before she died, a video call where she'd seemed more urgent than usual. "Riley, honey, there are things you need to know about this family. Things that have been buried too deep for too long. Promise me you'll remember what I taught you about plants. They always tell the truth, even when people won't." I'd promised, of course, thinking she was just being her usual cryptic self. Now, sitting in that lawyer's office with its leather-bound books and heavy air conditioning, I was beginning to understand she'd been trying to prepare me for something. The will reading started normally enough. Eleanor Bennett, being of sound mind and body, hereby bequeaths, the usual legal language that sounds like it was written by robots. Victoria got the main house and most of the money, which didn't surprise anyone. Theodore got the investment portfolio and the vacation home in the Hamptons. My cousins, Victoria and Theodore's twin boys, got trust funds that would keep them comfortable for life. Then came my turn. The lawyer cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and read words that would change everything. "To my beloved granddaughter, Riley Bennett, I leave my private study, its contents, and most importantly, the truth she deserves to know. In the locked cabinet behind my desk, she will find documents that reveal the real source of our family's wealth. Documents that prove not everything we've built our legacy on is as clean as it appears. I also leave her the choice of what to do with this information, trusting her journalist's integrity to guide her decision." The silence that followed was so thick you could have cut it with a butter knife. Victoria's face had gone from pink to white, to a shade of green that reminded me of seasick passengers on a ferry. Theodore was gripping his chair arm so hard his knuckles looked like they might pop right through his skin. "What documents?" Victoria's voice cracked like thin ice. The lawyer shrugged apologetically. "I'm afraid Mrs. Bennet didn't share the specifics with me. She simply instructed that Miss Riley be given full access to the study and its contents." That's when Victoria stood up so fast, her chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "This is absolutely ridiculous. That room contains family documents that concern all of us. Not just some girl who barely knew Eleanor anyway. Some girl." The dismissal in her voice hit me like a slap, but it also lit something inside me. A spark of the same fire I'd always seen in my grandmother's eyes. Barely knew her? I stood up too, matching her energy. I spent every summer with her until I left for college. She was the one who taught me to ask the right questions, to dig deeper when things don't add up. Seems like she thought I needed to dig a little deeper into our family history. Theodore finally spoke up, his voice carefully controlled. "Now, Riley, I'm sure whatever your grandmother left for you is just sentimental items. Nothing that needs to concern the whole family. Perhaps we could arrange for someone to go through the study first, just to make sure there aren't any sensitive documents that might be misunderstood." Misunderstood. There's that word again. It's amazing how many family secrets get labeled as misunderstandings. "I don't think so, Uncle Theodore. The will is pretty clear. Grandma left me that room and its contents. All of its contents." The lawyer nodded. "Miss Bennet is correct. The bequest is quite specific and legally binding." That's when Victoria played her final card. She softened her voice, put on a concerned family elder act that I'd seen her use on everyone from grocery clerks to country club committees. "Riley, sweetheart, you have to understand. Your grandmother wasn't well toward the end. She'd been saying things, making accusations that simply weren't true. Whatever she left for you, it's probably just the confused ramblings of an elderly woman who was losing touch with reality." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a forest fire. She was calling my grandmother crazy, the woman who had been sharp as a razor blade right up until her last day, who could still beat anyone at chess, and remembered every person's name she'd ever met. "You know what, Victoria, you might be right. Maybe what she left me is nothing important. But there's only one way to find out, isn't there?" I gathered my purse and stood to leave, but Victoria's voice stopped me at the door. "Riley, wait! Perhaps we could work something out. The family has always taken care of its own. If you're worried about money for school, or finding a job after graduation, I'm sure we could help. There's no need to go digging through dusty old papers when your energy could be better spent on your future." The offer was smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. It confirmed everything I needed to know. Whatever was in that study, Victoria desperately didn't want me to find it, which meant I absolutely had to look. "Thanks for the offer, but I can take care of myself. I learned that from Grandma Eleanor, too." I left them sitting there in that stuffy office, but not before I caught the look that passed between Victoria and Theodore. It was the kind of look that said, "We have a problem, and we need to fix it fast." 3 days later, I was standing in front of Eleanor's estate with a key in my hand and questions burning in my chest like acid. The house looked different somehow, bigger and more imposing than I remembered. Maybe that's what happens when you know you're about to uncover family secrets. The place starts looking like it's been keeping them. I let myself in through the front door, my footsteps echoing in the grand foyer with its crystal chandelier and marble staircase. Everything was exactly as Eleanor had left it, down to the reading glasses she'd forgotten on the side table and the book still open to page 237. Victoria hadn't wasted any time moving in, apparently. The study was on the second floor, at the end of a long hallway lined with family portraits. All those stern-faced ancestors staring down at me, like they were judging whether I was worthy of whatever truth waited behind that door. I'd been in the study plenty of times before, but always when Eleanor was there, and always from normal grandmother-granddaughter activities. Reading together, her teaching me about the family history, showing me old photo albums. I'd never paid much attention to the locked cabinet behind her massive oak desk. Now it seemed like the most important piece of furniture in the world. The key was exactly where the lawyer said it would be, taped under the bottom drawer of Eleanor's desk. My hands were shaking as I opened the cabinet, half expecting it to be empty, a final joke from a woman who loved keeping people guessing. But it wasn't empty. It was full of manila folders, each one labeled with dates going back decades. I pulled out the first folder, dated 1987, and opened it with the same reverence I might use handling ancient manuscripts. Inside were documents that made my blood run cold. Police reports, photographs, witness statements. All related to a chemical spill at one of the Bennett family's factories that had poisoned the water supply of a small town in Ohio. 17 people died. 43 more got sick with cancers that would kill them slowly over the following years. And the Bennett family had covered it up. Not just covered it up, but actively fought the lawsuits, buried the evidence, paid off inspectors, and ruined the lives of anyone who tried to speak up. The factory had been shut down quietly, the families of the victims paid hush money, and the whole thing swept under a carpet so thick that nobody outside of a few lawyers and company executives ever knew it happened. I sat there in my grandmother's chair, staring at photographs of children who'd gotten sick from drinking water contaminated by chemicals that should never have been in the ground. Reading testimony from workers who'd tried to report safety violations and been fired, blacklisted, some of them threatened with much worse. The Bennett family fortune, the money that had paid for this house, for my education, for the comfortable life I'd always known, was built on the graves of people who died, because profit mattered more than safety. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the signature on the cover-up documents. Theodore Bennett, Vice President of Operations. My uncle hadn't just known about the poisoning. He'd orchestrated the whole cover-up. And according to the documents, Victoria had helped him do it. She'd been the one to approach the victims, families with settlement offers, using her charm and social connections to convince them that fighting the company would be pointless. She'd literally looked grieving mothers in the eye and convinced them to stay silent about their children's deaths. I don't know how long I sat there, reading through document after document, each one revealing another layer of the corruption that my family had built their legacy on. There were more factories, more cover-ups, more victims. A pattern of behavior that stretched back generations, always justified as protecting the family business, protecting the family name. Always signed off on by the same people who'd raised me to believe in honesty and integrity. The sun was setting by the time I reached the final folder, the one that made everything else make sense. It was labeled Eleanor's Investigation and dated just 6 months ago. Inside were copies of all the other documents, but also something else. A letter addressed to me. My dearest Riley, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've found what I spent the last years of my life uncovering. I want you to know that I didn't know. For decades, I didn't know what Theodore and Victoria were doing in the name of protecting our family. I thought the money came from legitimate business success. I thought the good fortune we enjoyed was earned through hard work and smart investments. I was wrong. I was complicit in my ignorance, and I can never forgive myself for that. But you, my darling granddaughter, you have the chance to do what I was too old and too cowardly to do. You have the skills, the platform, and most importantly, the moral compass to make this right. I'm leaving this decision in your hands because I trust you to do what's just, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. The victims of our family's greed deserve justice. The communities we've poisoned deserve clean water and medical care, and compensation that actually matches the harm we've caused. And the world deserves to know that money can't wash away the stains of blood, no matter how much of it you have. I've also left you enough evidence to protect yourself if Theodore and Victoria try to silence you the way they've silenced others. They're not above using intimidation, blackmail, or worse to protect their secrets. Be careful, be smart, and remember that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. I love you, Riley. I'm proud of the woman you've become, and I know you'll make the right choice, whatever that choice is. Your grandmother, Eleanor. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the folder, my mind racing with the implications of what I'd discovered. This wasn't just about my family anymore. It was about justice for people who'd been waiting 30 years for someone to tell their story. But it was also about destroying the only family I had left, painting a target on my back that would follow me for the rest of my life. I thought about Victoria's offer in the lawyer's office, the easy money, the comfortable life, the chance to pretend I'd never opened that cabinet. It would be so simple to walk away, to let sleeping dogs lie, to be the good little girl who didn't rock the boat. Then I thought about the photograph I'd seen of a 7-year-old girl named Emma who died of leukemia caused by drinking contaminated water. I thought about her mother's testimony, describing how Emma had asked why the water tasted funny, why her hair was falling out, why the doctors couldn't make her feel better. I thought about my grandmother, spending her final years discovering that everything she believed about her family was a lie, carrying that burden alone because she didn't know who she could trust. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. I gathered up all the documents, loaded them into 3 large boxes, and carried them out to my car. Tomorrow, I would start making calls. Environmental lawyers, investigative journalists, victim advocacy groups. I would make sure every person who'd been hurt by my family's greed got their day in court, even if it was 30 years late. But first, I had a phone call to make. Victoria answered on the second ring, her voice honey-sweet and completely unsuspecting. "Riley, darling, how are you? Did you have a chance to look through your grandmother's study?" "I did, Aunt Victoria. I found exactly what she wanted me to find." The silence stretched for 10 long seconds. When Victoria spoke again, her voice was different. Harder. More like the woman who'd convinced grieving mothers to stay silent about their dead children. "I think we should have a family meeting, Riley. Tonight. There are things we need to discuss privately, family things that outsiders wouldn't understand." "You're right, Victoria. There are definitely things we need to discuss. But I don't think privacy is what these particular family things need anymore." I hung up before she could respond, then turned off my phone and drove straight to the hotel where I'd been staying. I had work to do, and I had a feeling I didn't have much time to do it. 3 hours later, I'd uploaded copies of every document to a secure cloud storage account and sent packets of the most damaging evidence to 5 different journalists, 3 law firms, and 2 environmental advocacy organizations. I also wrote a detailed account of everything I'd discovered, including my grandmother's letter and the threats I expected to start receiving very soon. By morning, the story would be in too many hands for Victoria and Theodore to suppress, no matter how much money they threw at the problem. I was just finishing the last email when someone knocked on my hotel room door. It was past midnight, and housekeeping doesn't work that late. I looked through the peephole and saw Theodore standing in the hallway, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past week. I opened the door but left the chain lock engaged. "Uncle Theodore, you're up late." "Riley, we need to talk. This situation has gotten out of hand, and I'm afraid you don't understand the full implications of what you're doing." "I understand perfectly. The question is, do you understand what you've been doing for the past 30 years? He sighed, and for a moment he looked like the uncle who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd taken me fishing on summer afternoons. Then the mask slipped back into place, and I was looking at a man who'd built his fortune on other people's graves. What your grandmother told you, what those documents suggest, it's not the whole story. There were reasons for the decisions we made, complicated business reasons that a young journalist might not fully grasp. Try me. Explain how poisoning children's drinking water was a complicated business decision." His face hardened. "Companies make difficult choices every day, Riley. We provided jobs for thousands of people, contributed millions to the local economy. Yes, there was an accident, but we handled it responsibly. We compensated the affected families generously." "Generously? Theodore, I read the settlement agreements. You paid each family less than you probably spend on wine in a year. And you made them sign agreements that prevented them from seeking medical care for conditions that you knew would develop later. Those families were taken care of. They received fair compensation for a regrettable accident that nobody could have predicted." The lie came so smoothly I almost admired his skill. Almost. Nobody could have predicted? Uncle Theodore, I have internal memos from 3 months before the spill, warning that the containment system was failing. I have records of safety inspectors being told to delay their visits until after temporary repairs could be made. I have testimony from workers who were threatened with termination if they reported the problems they saw. For the first time since I'd known him, Theodore Bennett looked genuinely rattled. "Riley, you're playing with forces you don't understand. There are people involved in this situation who won't hesitate to protect their interests through whatever means necessary." Is that a threat? It's a warning. From someone who cares about your safety. Walk away from this, take the money we offered you, and build a good life somewhere far from here. Let the dead stay buried. I looked at this man who'd been like a second father to me after my dad died, who'd paid for my college education and sent me birthday cards every year. This man who was now essentially telling me to shut up or face the consequences. The dead don't want to stay buried, Uncle Theodore. They want justice, and I'm going to make sure they get it. I started to close the door, but his hand shot out to stop it. For a moment, I saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. Something that reminded me of the men in the photographs who'd intimidated witnesses and silenced whistleblowers. Riley, you're making a mistake that you can't take back. Once you start down this path, there's no returning to the family. No support, no safety net, no second chances. You'll be on your own against people who have unlimited resources and no scruples about using them. Then I guess I'll be in good company with all the other people you've tried to silence over the years. I closed the door and turned the deadbolt. My heart racing, but my resolve stronger than ever. Through the peephole, I watched Theodore stand there for a long moment before walking away, his phone already pressed to his ear. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat by the window, watching for cars that moved too slowly or parked too long in the shadows. By dawn, I'd finished uploading the last of the documents and sent a comprehensive media packet to every major news outlet in the country. The story broke on a Tuesday morning in September, exactly 1 week after the will reading that changed my life. Chemical company covered up toxic spill that killed 17 inches, ran across the front page of the Washington Post, with a smaller headline underneath. Victims' families demand justice 30 years later. By noon, every major news network was running the story. By evening, federal investigators were announcing a full investigation into Bennett Chemical Industries and its subsidiaries. By the end of the week, Victoria and Theodore Bennett were under federal indictment for corporate manslaughter, environmental crimes, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. The lawsuits started flying like confetti at a parade. Wrongful death suits, environmental damage claims, class action suits from entire communities that had been poisoned by Bennett family businesses. The family fortune that had seemed so solid and permanent began crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide. Victoria called me once, 3 days after the story broke. Her voice was raw, stripped of its usual polish and pretense. "I hope you're satisfied, Riley. You've destroyed everything our family built, everything your father worked for, everything that would have been yours someday." "I didn't destroy anything, Victoria. I just shined a light on what was already destroyed. The difference is, now everyone can see it. Those people were going to die anyway. Most of them were poor, uneducated, living in a town that was already dying. We gave them more money than they ever would have seen otherwise. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away." Even now, facing prison and the collapse of everything she'd worked for, Victoria still couldn't see the victims as human beings who deserved better. They were people, Victoria. They had names, families, dreams. They deserved clean water and honest answers and justice when your company poisoned them. "Justice," she laughed, but it sounded more like crying. "You think this is justice? Destroying innocent people's lives to settle scores for strangers you never even met? The only innocent people in this story are the ones who died because you chose money over safety. Everyone else is getting exactly what they deserve." She hung up without another word. I never spoke to her again. The trial lasted 8 months. It made headlines across the country. Environmental lawyers called it a landmark case, the first time a major corporation and its executives had been held fully accountable for historic environmental crimes. Victim advocacy groups hailed it as a victory for communities that had been poisoned and silenced by corporate power. The Bennett family lawyers fought every charge, challenged every piece of evidence, tried every legal maneuver they could think of. But the documents my grandmother had left me were too comprehensive, too damning, too carefully preserved to be dismissed or explained away. Theodore was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Victoria got 12 years, partly because the prosecutor was convinced she'd been manipulated by her husband, though I knew better. The company was fined $2.8 billion, the largest environmental penalty in U.S. history at that time. More importantly, the victims and their families finally got their day in court. I was there when Emma's mother, now in her 70s, took the witness stand to tell the story of her daughter's death. I was there when the judge read the verdicts, when justice finally arrived 30 years late, but still powerful enough to change everything. I was also there when the bailiffs led my aunt and uncle away in handcuffs, their faces masks of disbelief and rage. Victoria looked at me one last time as she passed my seat in the gallery. The look said everything we'd never be able to say to each other again. 3 years later, I'm sitting in the garden of the house that used to belong to Eleanor Bennett, the house that now belongs to me. The courts determined that since I was the one who exposed the crimes that the house had been purchased with, and since I was the only family member who wasn't complicit in those crimes, the property should remain with the family line, but under different ownership. It's smaller than it used to be. I sold off most of the land to pay for cleanup efforts in the communities my family poisoned. The house itself has been transformed from a monument to wealth into something more like a home. I've turned Eleanor's study into my office, where I work as an environmental journalist, specializing in corporate accountability. The locked cabinet is now a bookshelf, filled with stories of communities fighting for clean air and water, of whistleblowers who chose truth over comfort, of ordinary people doing extraordinary things to protect the world they love. The rose garden Eleanor was so proud of is still here, though I've added a memorial section where 17 roses bloom every spring, one for each person who died because my family chose profit over people. I tend to those roses myself, and sometimes I talk to them about the stories I'm working on, the injustices I'm trying to expose, the victories and defeats that fill my days now. Plants don't lie, Eleanor used to say. They show you exactly what they are, no pretense, no games. She was right about that, just like she was right about so many things. The truth has a way of growing, even in the darkest soil, even when people spend decades trying to bury it. It finds a way to reach the light, to bloom, to spread seeds that grow into something beautiful and strong, and impossible to ignore. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the choice I made, if I miss the money and comfort and family connections I gave up to expose the truth. The answer is complicated, because grief and justice aren't mutually exclusive, and doing the right thing doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. I miss the uncle who taught me to fish, not the man who poisoned children's drinking water. I miss the idea of the aunt who seemed glamorous and sophisticated, not the woman who convinced grieving mothers to stay silent about their dead children. I miss the family I thought I had, not the one I actually had. But I don't regret anything. Every time I see a news story about corporate executives being held accountable for environmental crimes, every time I meet with families fighting for clean water in their communities, every time I see one of my articles make a difference in someone's life, I remember why I opened that cabinet and what Eleanor was trying to tell me. The truth is worth more than comfort. Justice is worth more than security. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for your family is to stop them from hurting other people's families. The Bennett name used to be synonymous with wealth and power and influence. Now it's associated with environmental justice and corporate accountability, and the importance of speaking truth to power. I think Eleanor would be proud of that transformation, even though it cost everything she'd spent her life building, especially because it cost everything she'd spent her life building. 6 months ago, I got a letter from Emma's mother, the woman whose daughter died from drinking contaminated water 30 years ago. She's in her 80s now, living in a nursing home in Ohio, but she still has the fierce spirit that kept her fighting for justice, even when everyone told her to give up. The letter was short and written in careful handwriting that spoke of age and determination in equal measure. Dear Miss Bennett, I wanted you to know that Emma would have been 47 years old today. She wanted to be a teacher. Did I ever tell you that? She used to line up her dolls and play school with them, making lesson plans about plants and animals and how to take care of the earth. I think she would have been good at it. I also wanted you to know that the scholarship fund you helped establish in her name has now sent 12 young people to college to study environmental science and journalism. They're learning how to protect the water and air and soil that Emma never got to grow up and protect herself. That feels like justice to me. Not the kind that brings her back, but the kind that makes sure her short life still matters, still makes a difference in the world. Thank you for giving my daughter a voice when everyone else wanted her to stay silent. Thank you for proving that some people still choose what's right over what's easy. I hope your grandmother is proud of the woman you became. I know Emma would be. I keep that letter in the desk drawer where Eleanor used to keep her reading glasses, next to a photograph of a 7-year-old girl with bright eyes and a gap-toothed smile, who deserved to grow up and become the teacher she dreamed of being. It reminds me why I do this work, why I chose truth over comfort, why some inheritances are worth more than money. My name is Riley Bennett, and this is the story of how I learned that family isn't just about blood and shared names and inherited wealth. It's about shared values and moral courage and the choice to love people enough to stop them from hurting others. It's about understanding that sometimes the most precious thing someone can leave you isn't treasure, but truth. And sometimes, the best way to honor the dead is to make sure their stories don't die with them. The roses are blooming again this spring, 17 of them reaching toward the sun, like they're trying to tell the world that beauty can grow from even the darkest soil. Eleanor was right. Plants don't lie. They show you exactly what they are, no pretense, no games. Just like the truth, just like justice, just like the choice between what's easy and what's right. They grow toward the light, no matter how deep you try to bury them.